back here on One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker, and joined now as we are, usually on Fridays, but with a Thursday night game, we made an exception. And so Greg Cosell joins us here. His weekly appearance on One Bills Live is presented by Pepsi. Pepsi is the official soft drink of the Buffalo Bills. Food deserves Pepsi. Greg, interesting game here tonight. Strength on strength. Bills
Yeah.
top flight number 2 offense against the Houston number 1 defense in the league. And I have to believe that you don't really feel like giving Houston's defense any extra advantages, but they'll have the edge of the home crowd and the noise and all of that, and Buffalo's offense going on silent count. So looking across that defense, I'm trying to find a matchup advantage, and the one that I like is in the slot with Miles Bryant starting in place of Petrie.
Sure.
I feel like that's a matchup they can attack, if they can scheme the right people on him, in the formation and the look. How has he done in the absence of Petrie, and have other teams gone after him?
They really haven't. I mean, and don't forget, they're not a high percentage man coverage defense. And obviously, since Petrie's gone out and since Stewart went out to safety, now they're playing Jalen Mills at safety in their nickel.
Right.
And Jalen Mills has been around the block a few times. And while he's not the best athlete on the field, he's a smart, savvy player. So they play really good team defense. It's not heavy man. Sure, they will play man, and in those situations, you obviously want to be able to take advantage of Bryant, certainly with Shakir, who can beat him. But this is a defense, and Brownie, you've been studying them. You're doing the game tonight. They're really good at all 3 levels. They've got good players.
Yeah.
And if you've noticed watching their defense, they've started to play EJ Speed a lot more at linebacker over To'o because he's just a better athlete. I mean, he gives them a lot more juice at the linebacker position. And they've got 2 really good corners in Stingley and Lassiter. And they don't match up. Stingley plays left corner. Lassiter plays right corner. And the Bills don't really have that receiver you probably match up to anyway. But that's the way they play. Bullock is a really good post safety, and now they're using him more, even down in the box a little more. He's become a little more physical. And I'm not sitting here saying they can't move the ball. Believe me, I'm just saying they're number 1 for a reason. They're a really good defense. Yeah. We know they have 2 big time edge players in Anderson and Hunter. Anderson is a top 3 speed to power pass rusher in the league. He'll predominantly go against Spencer Brown. Will play on the other side here and there, but mostly he'll line up against Spencer Brown. Hunter's a little different player. He's a little more flexible, a little more Gumby-like. Just a good defense. I mean, you have to be on top of your game in terms of execution. We know what we saw last week was your classic Josh Allen experience. He can do that any game. But I think in this game, there's going to have to be a sense, too, of let's take the plays within structure that are there and let's move the football. If it's a 6-yard gain on first down, let's take the 6-yard gain and make it 2nd and 4. We don't have to chase plays.
That's what, and I hate to say it like this, but that's what Bills fans have been absolutely banging their heads against the wall because the Bills have been so willing to do that in the first month and a half of the season. And, they were scoring 31 against the Jets. They were scoring 30 against,
right.
They scored 41 against Baltimore. But they were always willing to run the ball first. They're the number 1 rushing offense, all of that. But that's what had Bills fans going because you never saw them open it up, right? But in a game like this, ball protection, possession, and first downs is really what's going to do it.
Last week's game to me, and Brownie, you did the game, so you were in the stadium feeling it, but you don't really want to get stuck with, Josh making that interception like he did early in the game this week, last week where it's in his own territory, where, a 4th and 2 and he throws the pick. You don't want to, this game, again, you never know how a game plays out. I'm not going to sit here and say I know how the game's going to play out, nor am I saying that they should not throw the ball at all. But I think this has to be a sense. I agree with Steve to some extent. You can't rely on the Shavers touchdowns, an unbelievable play on a ball that should have been thrown to Gabe Davis for a first down, as you guys know. You can't rely on those kinds of plays. Can Josh make them more than most? And does he? Yes. But you can't go into a game saying those are the kinds of plays that have to happen or we can't win the game, because those plays don't always happen.
Right. All you have to do is think back to 2 of the last 3 road games and they were trying to live that way and
Right.
lost by 10 points and lost by 17 points. So that is not a way to be consistently
No.
successful in the NFL. So the efficiency model would seem to be the approach. My question to you is, what about using some of what worked well in the Kansas City game a few weeks ago when they got the ball out of Josh's hand quickly
Yep.
and,
Yep.
and worked the passing game that way? Would that be an approach that could work tonight?
Yes, because I think we know that Josh at any time, depending on how a play shakes out, can be Josh Allen. We know that. He's the most gifted, physically gifted quarterback in the league. We know that. But I think you have to take the throws that are there because this is a really good defense. They don't give up a ton of big plays. You can't go into this game thinking, you know what, if we don't hit 10 explosives, we can't win. I think you got to take the throws that are there. Does James Cook have to run for 160? No, but I think there has to be some sustaining element, and the game will dictate whether he gets 14 carries or 22 carries. We don't know how the game's going to play out, but I think that a productive run game needs to be part of your offense. I don't think you can go into this game with the idea that Josh is going to drop back 45 times by choice.
No.
I don't think
Right.
you can't think that way against this defense in that stadium. So I think you have to think a little more in terms of sustainability. And then if the plays present themselves, we know Josh can make them, but you can't go hunting for those plays.
Right, and when you get into, we've got into the thought process of what the roster is going to look like tonight because of the injuries. Shakir has been out of practice all week, but for personal reasons, the good kind. Him and his wife had a baby, that kind of stuff. Plus, he's been nursing some rib injuries. You've got other guys up and down out of the lineup. Condrington, the return game. McCole Hardman is now out of the lineup because of a hamstring injury that happened last week. How do you think the Bills formulate if you were going to go exaggerate the roster for what you think they have to do tonight to win? Do you elevate another tight end and the sixth offensive lineman, and go heavy, or do you go kind of 5 wide roster?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, Hawes and Knox are healthy, right? They're playing tonight, right?
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I may be nuts, but I actually think Hawes has a little more to him as a receiver as he develops. I'm not suggesting he's going to become, a top 5 receiving tight end in the league, but I think that if you want to go a little heavy, I would not take an eligible receiver off the field tonight. I mean, obviously, if it's goal line or if it's 3rd and 1, that different. But I'm talking about in the general Steve flow of the game. I don't think I would take an eligible off the field because if you put Anderson out there, you're not throwing the ball to him. He's not running routes. I think Hawes can do the same thing in the run game for the most part, and he does give you an eligible receiver. And I think there's a little more there as he's developing that's there in the receiving game. So I wouldn't go that route. That's just my opinion. They may see it differently, and I guess we'll find out in a little while. But I would not make this a heavy game because they're really good up front. It's not just the two ends. They're really good inside with big people who are good and move well. Rankins still has a lot of juice. Mario Edwards, it seems like every year he's with another team, although he's been with Houston for a couple of years now. And wherever he goes, he plays really well. And I always wonder why he's always with another team. But he's a really good player. And then the other guy, I'm forgetting his name, begins with a T, the other D tackle.
Well, Tim Settle. Tim Settle.
No, not on Buffalo.
Nico Autry?
He's a really good player too, by the way.
Yeah.
Tommy Tagayo.
Yeah, so I mean, you're going to have to run to some degree, but I wouldn't make this, Steve, a let's line up and try to play power football as my foundation. I don't think that's going to work.
Let's flip it around to the defensive side where it looks like the Bills are going to get Shaq Thompson back in the lineup at the second level. We know that the Bills are playing more base defense than maybe they have played percentage-wise in the last 5 years. They know it helps their run defense, which needs help. I think we would all agree with that. So maybe shape for us what Buffalo's run front can do, especially in base, on obvious rundowns to neutralize Woody Marks and their run game.
Yeah, and they're they're not a heavy 12 personnel team. I mean, in fact,
Right.
they don't play a ton of 12 personnel. They line up predominantly in 11 personnel. But you can still obviously run out of 11 personnel. I think they're fifth or sixth in the league, Brownie, as you probably know from doing your study of the game. I think they're
Yeah.
fifth or sixth in the league in terms of percentage of 11 personnel. But they have not had a great run game. But Marks has a little juice. Chubb has never, unfortunately, because he was so great, he's never seemingly gotten back to what he was before that really tragic injury. So, and I think their O line is just okay. I don't think it's a really good O line by any stretch of the imagination. I'd probably, based on watching as many teams as I do, I'd say it's in the average category. Um, I think that's an area that the Bills defense has to win. Their D line has to be the better unit than the Texans O line. What that means, who can say the way a game plays out? I'm not suggesting that they're going to hold them to 10 yards rushing or sack Mills 6 times, but I think they have to be in control of that unit matchup. The question becomes in the pass game because they've got good receivers. Nico Collins is a true boundary X. He lines up, I think, the second or third most times in the league as a boundary X receiver, the single receiver to the short side of the field. He is a tough guy to defend because he's big and he can run. He's a very difficult guy to defend. And then they've got these two, young rookies. And Higgins, I loved coming out of Iowa State. And Hutchinson's turned out to be kind of that almost like physical wide receiver who makes tough catches and does block in the run game. Actually, they use him that way. So, and Mills, as Steve was saying before we went on the air, Mills is not just your typical backup that you're putting out there and hoping he doesn't screw up. I mean, he's thrown, I think, more than 40 balls in each of the last two starts, and he can throw it now. I mean, you're dealing with a kid that was the number one recruited quarterback in the country coming out of high school, and the SEC stayed away from him because he's from Atlanta, because he made it clear he was going to Stanford. But this kid is not, he's not just a guy that you put out there as a backup. He can throw the football.
Last one, Greg, real quick. Why has Houston struggled to score points? I mean, they've got one score of 36 and one against 44, but everything else is they struggle to score touchdowns. Why? They
struggle to score. They don't run the ball well at all in the red zone. They struggle really a lot there, and I think that's a big factor. It's hard. The other thing, which I'm not a fan of, it's funny. I heard Ben Johnson talking about this, the coach of the Bears, and I agree with him 1,000%. But they try to do this because their receivers are big. I'm not a fan of 50-50 balls. I'd rather see schematics in the red zone, and they throw a lot of 50-50 balls. And, to me, I know, Collins is great. Higgins is a big guy, but I don't think that's the best way to approach the red zone passing game. But the bottom line is they don't run the ball very well. And when you start getting into a condensed field and you can't run the ball, it's a problem.
Yeah. And surprisingly, that Texans defense, even though they've given up the fewest possessions in the red zone, 28th in red zone defense. 15 of 23 possessions have gone for touchdowns against them. Somebody explain that one to me.
Yeah.
You got any theories, Greg?
No, I do not. But the way I see this game, and I know we got to go, but the way I see this game is I hope the Bills can at least generate some offense early. Because I think if you start getting into this game, late second quarter, even into the third quarter, and it has the feel of like a really close game that's not high scoring, then I think it just starts to have a bad feel to it, Brown. You've done enough games to know exactly
and it plays into the hands of what Houston wants to do.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're going to go ahead 17-0 in the first quarter, but I think you want to have some success early and feel like you're moving the ball up and down the field.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thanks, Greg, as always, for the insight. We appreciate it. That's Greg Cosell, senior producer from NFL Films. And Bills Mafia, it's tailgating season, and there's nothing better than an ice-cold Pepsi Zero Sugar to pair with your tailgating food rituals. As the great Josh Allen once said, Bills fans deserve Pepsi. Bills Mafia has brought it this season, and so has Pepsi. Bills tailgates deserve Pepsi. Go Bills.